My house, both inside and out, seems to be the home of a madman because crosses are scratched on every meter and the windows are boarded up. But I'm not crazy. All this is a necessary measure because I'm trying to keep something out of the house. The window opens with a creak and the frosty air hits you in the face. I breathe in the splendor of a winter evening, shudder slightly, pick up the snow from the windowsill and squeeze it in my hands. Who would have thought then that very soon I would not be able to open the window, and I would shudder not from the cold, but from the fact that it was a million times colder. But let's get this straight. We're in no hurry. The 24th evening of October turned out to be beautiful. Winter came unexpectedly early, and the whole village was covered with snow. The heaviest snowflakes were falling everywhere, crawling under my autumn jacket as I walked home from the bus stop. Trying not to fall, I made my way further and further, leaned on the fences of the neighbors, and at some point almost reached my house. Almost. I found it strange, unnecessarily inappropriate, and to some extent even scary. I heard a very loud bang from somewhere in the forest that was almost hidden in the darkness. And this blow was so strong that I was even afraid that the ground might crack now. Synchronously, in those houses where there was no light yet, it began to appear. The blow didn't happen again, but the neighbors came out to watch, and I was still standing in a kind of stupor. My first impulse was to go and see what had happened, but that evening I decided not to. Thinking that everything was fine, the neighbors went home and got back into everyday life. By the way, I followed their example. That very evening no longer brought back strange memories, but now the night has come, which has given us something terrible. The village was covered with snow. The blizzard did not stop and only made itself felt more strongly when gusts of wind hit the flimsy windows. I was lying in bed in a house that had been lonely for years, but suddenly something I had never expected came knocking at my door. And not only did it knock, but it got inside, forced me to abruptly open my almost closed eyes, think for a couple of minutes, and then run to the window. A scream came from the forest. It seemed unreal. It hit my ears and got inside forever. That very scream was hoarse, human-like, long-drawn, terrible, as if from the depths of hell or from the most terrible nightmare. And it didn't come from any particular direction, but seemed to come from everywhere. The scream was repeated twice and then disappeared, leaving an unimaginable fear that did not want to go away. I continued to stand at the window and peer into the forest, hoping to find at least some answers, but there were none. There was some kind of horror last night. What kind of monster can scream like that? I heard the reactions of my neighbors in the morning because everyone was just discussing the night's incident. We were all afraid, but we didn't know what it was yet. The very next night, falling asleep with some apprehension, I did not expect anything, but it happened again. As if from everywhere, in the darkness of the night, the already familiar screams were heard, which spread through the village, and this time enveloped in such a chilling horror that did not exist even yesterday. Along with the incessant screams, I heard the same thuds, as if something was breaking the ground. The house was cracking slightly, making me worry about the safety of these walls, while the strongest blows were hitting my ears. In the darkness of the night, squinting from my bed, I saw a terrible picture. Snow was falling lightly from the trees. It all ended as abruptly as it began, leaving every inhabitant of this village alone, with the fear of a damn terrible unknown that we wanted to figure out. But there was no one else. The neighbors kept discussing dark nightmares until their mouths were dry, and they even wanted to go look for the source in the woods, but there was just a problem. To say is not to do. Of the sturdy men in the village, I was the only one, which meant I would have to do the search. Not pensioners crawling through the winter forest, but I refused. I was afraid to even think about going there. Meanwhile, there was a lull, and we began to believe that those very blows and screams were some isolated cases, the origin of which was clearly man-made. Somewhere there was a rift or something, and the wind passing through the forest took on such bizarre shapes of screams. Right now, if that were the case, I wouldn't have boarded up the windows. November approached quietly but quite confidently. We continued to live as before, only looking disapprovingly towards the forest, towards those towering trees that hid something there. Everything seems to be quiet, but still something is wrong. I heard constantly in the neighborhood. It seems as if there is something nearby. I began to feel it in the first week of November. It was getting late, and apart from the mundane sounds, nothing bothered me. I continued to sit quietly in the kitchen when suddenly something slipped by the side, outside the window. I distinctly heard the creaking of snow in the courtyard I had closed, and I didn't quite understand how this could happen. The fact is that the creaking sounded like rapid footsteps, as if someone had run. But even with all their desire, there was no one to run in our village. Afraid to open the window, I look out anyway, trying to find the source of the sounds. But there's only darkness and silence, and it's not possible to see footprints in the snow. But at some point I forget about my desire, because I hear footsteps. A creak came from the room. The truly dead silence was interrupted by creaks from a room where no one should be. But footsteps, they were real, scary, and they were coming. Closer and closer, panic came to me. My heartbeat was intercepted, and when the sounds of footsteps were somewhere in the long hallway, I realized that I had big problems. The old floorboards not only creaked, I could see them bending under someone's weight. But there would be no one in front of me. The floorboards will creak again, and the sounds will disappear. Possible footprints will be covered with snow and nothing. I won't have any evidence of a nighttime incident. I won't have anything to show my neighbors so they don't think I'm crazy, but it won't be necessary. It turns out that it wasn't just me they came to that very night. Throughout the day, I heard dozens of disturbing stories, the essence of which boiled down to strange rustles, creaks, and a sense of presence. "You should go and see what's there. I think you're safe during the day," the neighbor told me, pointing towards the woods, which is why I almost sent her far away, despite her advanced age. The nightmares came to life, and my hopes that mysticism exists only in fictional stories crumbled. I went through my supplies, pulled out all the boards I had accumulated over my life, and just filled the windows with them. I couldn't help it, because that very night switched something in me, made me afraid even during the day. Furiously hammering nails, I really hoped that this would help me, protect me from an unknown monster. The week went by uneasily. Every dark and seemingly calm evening, I expected a trick. Through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, I could see the few residents who had decided to leave. They were hobbling down the only street with their bags at the ready, and I was genuinely jealous of them because I didn't have such an opportunity. The very trick that was supposed to happen happened by the end of November, when I was sitting in my hut in front of a boarded-up window and thinking that maybe I shouldn't have started all this. Maybe I should tear off the boards and live like before, but I just didn't know that like before. Already it won't be. A sharp sound snapped me out of my reverie. I continued to sit in front of the boarded-up window and just stared thoughtlessly at the boards until I was startled by a sharp and loud scream from the forest, the same one that I had once heard. I roused myself, broke out of my thoughts, and walked away from the window. That monster, may be out there right now, coming from somewhere and heading towards our village. And the scariest thing is not even that, but that I do not know why. For about an hour, everything was quiet and peaceful, exactly until the moment when the creaking of snow was heard somewhere nearby, behind the clogged windows. The creaking of the snow continued to increase. Then it became quieter, and even then I realized that this something was just running around my house and perhaps looking for an entrance. And it will find it, because in the far part of the room, I will hear a creak. Thickening the already gloomy colors, it will cut through the silence. The footsteps will become closer, brighter, scarier. I'm standing in the kitchen. I even got up and pressed myself against the boarded-up window, and then it got to my bones. The windows are clogged. I won't have time to escape. Grabbing the board, I began to tear it off, but for some reason I hammered it with huge nails, hoping that if anything it would not come off. And yes, it did not come off. The footsteps in my house crept up to the dark hallway, stopped somewhere there, and I felt a deathly heavy and terrible gaze on me. I wanted to paint the windows green to somehow make up for the inadequacy of the new design of my house. And right now it dawned on me. Looking at the bucket of green paint, glancing briefly at the empty hallway from which something might be looking at me, I decided to do what I had to do. I take the bucket, remove the lid, and the boards creak under my feet. There's an empty hallway ahead, and I want to make sure it's empty, sacrificing expensive paint. Abruptly, I pour a bucket of green paint into the hallway, and suddenly I hear a terrible scream, not from the woods, but from the hallway. The lights go out, the semi-darkness spreads through the house. The light bulbs explode, and I stand in a stupor. A second before the light disappeared, when I poured the paint into the void, part of it stopped on this very void, clearly tinting a previously invisible figure. She jerked to the side and I saw her, the monster. It was the figure of an ordinary person, just like you and me, only taller, right up to the ceiling and with a very large oval head. The previously transparent but now greenish figure shifted to the side. The creaks of the boards scattered through the house. The monster was moving away towards the room, and green paint was dripping from it.